You know when you open up your phone's camera roll?
Yeah.
And you just start scrolling back. Like
Yeah.
way back.
Oh, yeah. The endless scroll into the past.
Right. You scroll past yesterday, past last month, and suddenly you find yourself looking at a picture from, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Usually something totally random, too.
Exactly. It's like a slightly out of focus photo of a street lamp or maybe a half-eaten sandwich on a generic diner plate.
Yep, I have so many of those.
And you just sit there staring at the screen and you realize you have absolutely zero memory of taking that picture. Like none.
It's a really strange feeling.
It is.
Yeah.
Because you were physically there, right?
Yeah.
You looked at that sandwich, you pulled out your device, you framed the shot, you captured the data.
Yeah.
But the actual memory of the experience is just completely gone.
Well, I mean, it's a very modern type of digital amnesia.
Digital amnesia. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, because we capture massive amounts of data every single day. We take thousands of photos of our surroundings. But because we rarely organize or revisit those files with any real intention, the data just kind of vanishes into a void.
It really does. It just gets buried.
Right. We've replaced active, intentional observing with passive hoarding. We just assume the phone is doing the remembering for us.
We capture so much, but we observe so little, which is honestly why today's source material just stopped me on my tracks. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Yes, glad to be here.
Our mission today is to explore this brief but honestly deeply fascinating excerpt from a massive digital gardening journal. We're going to uncover the joy of rediscovery and the quiet beauty of low-maintenance nature.
It's a really unique source we have today.
It really is. We're looking at a single post published on June 13th, 2026 by an author named Ang. And the title of this post alone tells you we are dealing with a radically different approach to documenting life.
Oh, definitely.
The post is titled Notes on Gardening Part 924, Revisiting the Spicy Jatropha. And the scientific name, Jatropha integerrima, is right there in the header.
I really want to pause on that number for a second.
Yeah.
Part 924. Just let the sheer weight of that sink in.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the scale of that project is staggering. If you, sit down and do the math, if you were writing one dedicated post a week, hitting 924 means you have been continuously, unbrokenly documenting your garden for nearly 18 years.
18 years. That's a massive commitment.
Right. And even if you were writing a post every single day without fail, which is huge on its own, you are looking at over 2.5 years of daily journaling.
And Ang opens this entry with a greeting that feels, I don't know, almost quaint today. The post starts with, "Dear Interweb."
I love that. Dear Interweb.
Yeah, and it's followed immediately by, continues from my previous post. So, this isn't someone just shouting random disconnected thoughts into the void for, social media engagement.
No, not at all.
This is a tightly linked, deeply intentional chain of observation. Ang is building a comprehensive chronological catalog of a very specific slice of the world, just one tiny entry at a time.
But the scale of the project isn't even the most compelling part to me. It's the methodology Ang uses inside this specific entry. Before we even get to the physical plant, this Spicy Jatropha, the text details this rigorous process Ang goes through just to figure out what they're looking at.
Yes.
Ang calls it the identification step.
What's fascinating here is that the phrasing there is very deliberate. Ang writes, "While drafting this post during the identification step, where I compares my taken photos against the online photos."
I had to say, when I first read that, it sounded a bit cold to me. The identification step.
Cold? How so?
Well, it sounds like a protocol you'd follow in a sterile lab, right? Not something you do in your backyard while looking at a pretty shrub.
Well, I mean, it sounds clinical because it is a rigorous application of the scientific method just by an amateur botanist. Think about the contrast with our camera roll discussion earlier.
Oh, right. Most of us, we see a plant, maybe we snap a photo, maybe we let an app tell us what it is, and then we immediately forget it.
Yeah, totally.
But Ang has a very defined workflow. Step 1, visually observe the plant in the real world. Step 2, take original photographs. Step 3, run a manual cross-referencing process, holding those original photos up against established databases.
Oh.
Yeah. Ang is actively forcing reality to align with the digital record to ensure total accuracy.
And it is that exact friction in the manual effort of comparing the photos that triggers a memory. Ang isn't just looking at a screen. Ang is actively engaging with the material.
Exactly.
During this process, Ang writes that the overall shrub reminded me that I've seen and even wrote about this plant species before.
Which prompts this whole internal archival dig. Because Aang has this massive numbered infrastructure, they are actually able to search backward through their own history.
Right.
And they find it. They realize they first encountered this exact same species of plant way back around part 613. Part 613. That is hundreds of posts ago. Who knows how much time has passed between 613 and 924?
A lot of time, presumably.
But this is where I start to see a massive difference between Aang's journal and, like, my messy camera roll. Doesn't it blow your mind that someone can document over 900 parts of a gardening journal and still have these moments of complete rediscovery?
It really does. It shows how much the system works.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how much we look at without actually seeing. When I find a forgotten photo on my phone, it usually makes me feel totally disconnected from my past self, like I'm a stranger to my own life.
Because there's no context.
Exactly. But Aang uses the infrastructure of the journal to bridge a massive gap in time. The past self who wrote part 613 is directly collaborating with the present self, writing part 924.
And the infrastructure of the journal is the only reason that collaboration is even possible. You can't revisit an observation if you never properly documented it in the first place.
That's a great point.
The discipline of assigning a sequential number to every single entry is what weaves the safety net. Without that structure, the memory of the plant from part 613 would have slipped right through the cracks.
Just like the blurry street lamp in the phone.
Exactly like the street lamp.
But notice how Aang's language shifts the moment that connection is made. We go from this highly clinical, data-driven identification step to a sudden, almost jarring burst of poetry.
Oh, the phrasing about time.
Yes. Aang writes that they first encountered the plant, quote, so many moons ago, around part 613.
So many moons ago.
I read that and I just smiled.
Yeah.
Because it's such a sharp pivot. You have this meticulous archivist tracking entry numbers into the 900s, but when it comes to measuring the actual passage of time, they default to linear cycles.
It's a really striking choice of words.
They ground the digital journal firmly back into the rhythms of the natural world.
It creates a beautiful tension in the text, I think. You have the rigid numerical taxonomy of part 613 and the scientific nomenclature of Jatropha integerrima, and that's juxtaposed directly against so many moons ago. It really suggests that Aang is operating on two levels simultaneously. There's the analytical mind that catalogs, and the romantic mind that experiences.
I love that. So the analytical and romantic minds finally agree that this plant is the Spicy Jatropha. But I am stuck on this name.
The common name.
Yeah. When I hear Spicy Jatropha, my brain immediately sets a very specific expectation. I hear spicy, and I think of something, well, aggressive.
Like a hazard in the garden.
Right. I expect sharp thorns or a serrated edge or maybe a sap that burns your skin. I expect a plant that demands to be handled with heavy leather gloves.
Sure.
But when Aang actually starts describing the physical traits of this shrub, none of that is there.
Not even a hint of it. The common name sets a trap of expectation, but Aang's observation completely ignores the name to focus on the physical reality. And the first thing Aang evaluates are the flower.
Yes, the blooms.
The text notes that the plant produces vibrant red blooms. But there is a crucial caveat. Aang writes, if you see the photos, while the blooms are in vibrant red, the size are too small to be noticeable, unless in full cluster.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the concept of the full cluster is fascinating.
It is.
We have a color, vibrant red, which is inherently loud. Nature uses red as a siren to attract attention. Right?
Absolutely.
But Aang points out that a single bloom is so small, it is effectively invisible to the human eye. It doesn't matter how loud the color is if the scale is too small.
It's a brilliant observation about the mechanics of visual impact. An individual microbloom achieves nothing on its own. It is entirely insignificant.
Yeah.
The plant only succeeds in creating a visual statement when those tiny blooms group together into a collective structure. The full cluster is the only thing that registers.
It's like the ultimate biological example of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. A single microscopic red dot is just noise, but a cluster of them is a beacon.
A very effective one.
But even with that vibrant red beacon screaming for attention, Aang doesn't actually linger on the flowers. The text dismisses the blooms almost immediately.
Yeah, the blooms are secondary. The text pivots sharply. Aang writes, nevertheless, what intrigued me is the leaf shape, which it's fiddle-shaped.
A fiddle-shaped leaf.
Right.
See, I just love how evocative that is. Isn't it funny how a name sets an expectation, but the actual physical reality, like leaves shaped like an instrument, is what ends up capturing your attention?
It really is. Most casual observers would be entirely blinded by the red blooms.
Definitely.
It takes a very sophisticated eye to look past the obvious, flashy element of a plant and find intrigue in the morphology of the foliage. Aang zeroes in on the curves of the leaf, the way it flares out at the base and pinches in at the middle, mimicking the waist of a classical instrument.
It implies a sort of musicality, doesn't it? Like a rhythm to the way the plant grows. We go from the aggressive expectation of a spicy plant, past the loud red of the flowers, and land on the quiet geometry of a leaf shaped like a tiny violin.
That's a great way to put it.
But this isn't just a static portrait of a fiddle-shaped leaf. Aang isn't just standing there admiring it from afar. The text reveals that Aang is actively testing the plant.
Oh, yes.
Aang writes, "Nevertheless, I've managed to obtain one sample for evaluation purpose, and the plant had been thriving so far."
Obtained one sample for evaluation purpose. Again, we're back to that highly deliberate, almost clinical language.
Right.
Aang isn't just taking a cutting to make the patio look nice. The plant is a subject in a long-term trial.
It sounds like a tech reviewer getting a prototype device or something. Evaluation purpose.
Well,
But the result of this evaluation is what really caught my attention. Aang says the sample has been, quote, thriving so far.
Thriving, yeah.
But it's the why behind that thriving that feels so counterintuitive to me. Aang connects the performance of this evaluation sample directly to how the plant behaves in its natural habitat, noting, based on what I've observed in the wild, the plant can survive with little or no maintenance needed.
Which completely upends the traditional narrative of horticulture, if you think about it.
How so?
Well, in the gardening world, we often conflate care with active intervention.
oh, right.
We think that to be a good gardener, we must constantly prune and fertilize and chemically adjust the soil pH and, micromanage every single variable of a plant's existence.
The helicopter parent approach to plants?
Exactly. We assume that if we are not actively doing something to the plant, we are neglecting it.
Yes. And that mindset bleeds into everything we do, not just gardening. I read little or no maintenance needed, and I immediately thought about modern friendships.
Friendships.
Yeah. If you think about it, the Spicy Jatropha is the ultimate low-maintenance friend.
Okay, I can see where you're going with this.
You know the exact type of friend I'm talking about. The friend you don't need to text every single day to prove the relationship exists.
The ones you can just pick up right where you left off.
Exactly. The friend where you don't have to constantly reassure them or, water the dynamic with endless check-ins or manage their emotional soil pH. You might not speak to them for so many moons, but when you finally do sit down for a coffee, they are still just vibrant and thriving. The friendship survives precisely because it doesn't require constant, anxious maintenance.
That is a remarkably apt translation of Aang's observation.
Thank you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what Aang has realized through this evaluation process is that for the Jatropha integerrima, intervention is actually detrimental.
Wow.
Its resilience isn't a product of being pampered in a controlled environment. Its resilience is a fundamental feature of its internal design.
So what does this all mean? We spend so much time micromanaging things in our lives, but here is this beautiful fiddle-leafed plant that literally thrives on being left alone. And isn't that just a massive relief?
It is a relief.
Because we live in an era of absolute hyper-optimization. We have apps to track our sleep cycles, apps to remind us to drink water, spreadsheets to manage our hobbies. We are exhausted by the belief that everything in our lives requires constant, active steering to prevent it from falling apart.
And Aang brings that exact realization home in the final sentence of the post. After observing the wild behavior and running the evaluation sample, Aang concludes, "This is one of those plant species where you simply just put there and lets nature take its own course."
Simply just put there.
Yeah.
There's so much comfort in that phrasing. It just strips away all the anxiety of performance.
It requires a profound level of humility from the observer, too. Aang has to recognize and accept that human intervention is not required for this living thing to flourish.
Right.
In fact, let the plant rely on its own fiddle-shaped leaves to capture sunlight, let it rely on its vibrant red clusters to function as they evolve to function, and just leave it alone.
It's almost a paradox, though, if you think about it. Think about the journey we just took through this text.
Okay.
Aang concludes that the best way to interact with the Spicy Jatropha is to be completely hands-off, to let nature take its own course.
Yeah.
But Aang only arrived at that hands-off conclusion through the most hands-on, hyper-diligent, 924-part documentation process imaginable.
Yeah, that is the central irony of the entire deep dive today. The relentless daily discipline of tracking and photographing and cross-referencing and archiving is the exact mechanism that brings Aang to a place of total surrender.
The journal is incredibly high maintenance, so the garden can be deeply low maintenance.
Precisely. It's a transfer of energy. Instead of pouring frantic energy into controlling the physical plant like pruning it into submission or forcing it to grow a certain way, Aang pours all that energy into understanding the plant's true nature through observation.
And because Aang did the work to understand it back in Part 613, they can appreciate it fully today in Part 924. They don't have to relearn the lesson.
No, the digital archive acts as an anchor.
Right, allowing time to pass naturally without losing the wisdom gained along the way. Dear interweb, indeed. Aang has carved out this quiet, meticulously cataloged corner of the internet where tiny red blooms are appreciated for their collective effort, where fiddle-shaped leaves subvert our spicy expectations, and where nature is allowed the dignity of just being itself.
It's a quiet masterclass in how to pay attention to the world, honestly, disguised as a short gardening update.
It truly is. We started out today talking about the digital amnesia of a cluttered camera roll. We saw how Aang combats that amnesia with a clinical identification step, turning a simple garden shrub into an opportunity for deep archival connection.
Bridging the gap from 613 to 924.
Exactly. And we explored the subtle geometry of the fiddle shape over the loud distraction of a vibrant red cluster. And finally, we uncovered the deep relief of a species that thrives under the philosophy of little to no maintenance.
All of that contained within the 924th entry of a private catalog.
Which leaves us with a lingering question for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We saw how Aang used this massive, detailed record to connect a forgotten encounter so many moons ago to the present moment. If you were keeping a numbered 900-part journal of your own daily, mundane observations. Wait, no, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
If you were actually documenting those little moments, what overlooked fiddle-shaped details of your own life would you suddenly rediscover years from now?
That's a great thought.
The next time you find yourself scrolling blindly back through your camera roll, ask yourself, what quiet moments of low-maintenance beauty are buried in there, just waiting for you to finally stop scrolling and actually start seeing?